Your everyday surroundings have a huge impact on your mental health, so creating a space that feels comfortable and pleasant and sparks joy can really make or break your mood. Wall paneling can completely transform a room. I can't even express how much joy I feel just staring at my paneled wall. It's literally like art. It's like a picture frame, but the art is the frame itself. It adds depth and texture to an otherwise plain wall and just really adds a very classy, elegant, and warm vibe. You can do a whole room, you can just do a feature wall like I've done, you can do single boxes, double boxes, you can do half a wall, you can do the full paneled wall, and there are so many trim styles to choose from that your options are really endless. So if you've been thinking about trying this out or have just been thinking about how you can enhance your sad looking rental, then keep watching because I am going to walk through in detail, step by step, exactly how to do this. Disclaimer. I am not a professional. I don't even really consider myself a handy woman. I am just someone who is willing to put in a lot of work to get a beautiful result. So if I can do it, you can do it. This is actually my second time doing wall paneling. The last time I did it in my previous condo, I had the help of my very good friend AJ, who is a handyman and a builder of all things. Given that this was the first time I did it by myself, I did have a few mishaps, so I'm gonna share that with you so that you can get it right the first time. Now, before we get started, and I don't wanna burst your bubble, but you do need to get the approval of your landlord. Even though we're not gonna use any nails, it is going to be a permanent installment. I haven't had any issues getting approval from my landlords. It is a very timeless addition that actually can help increase value of their home anyway. Just maybe don't tell them it's your first time doing it. You can screenshot a photo of mine and say that that's what you did in your last condo. So your landlord has approved and you're ready to get started. The first thing that you need to do is figure out your paneling measurements. This is the part that AJ completely did for me last time, and although he did check my math this time and it was a go, I made a mistake in how I understood those measurements, and that's where I had a mishap. There are calculators online that will do this math for you, but I think it's best if you understand how to do those calculations yourself, especially because you might want to make adjustments depending on where there are outlets on your wall. So the first thing you want to do is decide on your design. How many boxes do you want on the wall? Do you want 2 smaller boxes and 1 bigger box in the middle like I've done now? Do you want all the boxes to be the same width? Decide what you want the design and layout to be and sketch that out. You'll also want to decide on the width of your molding. I actually made a couple trips to Home Depot. I did look up some online, but I kind of wanted to see what it actually looked like in person, and I ended up going with a 3/4 inch width of molding. So you've decided on your design, you've decided on the width of the molding. Now it's time to simply get the length and height measurements of your wall and map out any outlets and include them on your sketch as well. When you include the outlets in your drawing, you also want to indicate the distance of those outlets from the respective side of the wall. If the outlet interferes with your molding, that's okay. You can work around them, and I did in my last place. But if it's possible to completely avoid them altogether, then that's easiest and it looks better, so that would be my preference. Okay, so it's time to figure out the actual measurements. Paneling typically has 3 to 4 inches of space in between them and from the wall, so you can use that as a guideline. For your math to be right, your gaps plus your width of your molding plus the width of your boxes all need to equal the full length of your wall. Since my wall is 142 inches and my spacing is 4 inches and there are 4 gaps, I'm going to subtract 16 inches from 142 inches. That leaves me with 126 inches. Since my molding width is 3/4 inches and there are 6 vertical moldings in my design across the length of the wall, I'm going to subtract 4.5 inches from 126 inches. So now I'm left with 121.5 inches. I know that I want my middle box to be roughly twice the size as the ones on either side. So I'm going to divide that by 4 and I get 30.375 inches. Since that's a bit hard to measure, I'm just going to round that up to 30.5 inches for the boxes on the left and the right. So that's a total of 61 inches. That means that I'm now left with 60.5 inches, which is going to be the length measurement for my middle box. Now you want to look at your drawing and confirm that with these measurements, you are not going to run into any of your outlets. This is where you're going to have to play around with the numbers and do some trial and error. And if it is just not possible to work around the outlets because of the spacing that you want in between your boxes, that's totally fine too. You can just cut the molding around your outlets. Okay, so here's what I missed that is very important. Remember how we accounted for the width of the molding? Well, that width actually needs to be added back into these horizontal length measurements of your boxes. When you cut these pieces of molding, they're going to be cut at a 45-degree angle so that they can seamlessly join together. What that means is there's going to be one longer side on the outside of your molding and one shorter side on the inside. The calculations that we just went through give you the measurement of the shorter side, but we're going to get the measurement of the longer side because that's what's easier to work with. When you actually join the pieces together to make a box, the width of the vertical pieces that we had accounted for actually becomes part of the length measurement of the longer side of your horizontal piece. So my left and right box have a length measurement of 30.5 inches for the shorter side of the molding, which means the long side of the length is actually 32 inches. My middle box that has a shorter side length measurement of 60.5 inches actually becomes a longer side measurement of 62 inches. The other way to do this is to completely forget accounting for the molding width, and that way you just get the outside measurement that you're working with. So doing this vertically, my wall is 90 inches high and there are 2 spaces of gapping 4 inches each. So that's 90 minus 8, and that's 82 inches. And that means the outside measurement of these vertical lengths is 82 inches. And I don't even bother needing to know what the inside measurement is. It doesn't matter what molding width I select. The outside measurement is always going to be 82 inches. And then to figure out how much molding you need in total, you just take your measurements times the number of pieces that you'll need of each of those, add them all together, and that is in total how much molding you will need. So now that you know the measurements of your moldings, you're ready to buy your supplies. First, you're gonna need your molding. There's some molding that you can buy per foot, and then there's others that are pre-cut to specific lengths that you buy at those pre-cut lengths. If you're getting molding that's sold by the foot, this is kind of pretty easy because basically you just take all the measurements of the pieces that you need and you cut them yourself at the store. When you make those cuts, make sure that you give yourself a few extra inches just in case you make a mistake. The molding that I wanted was actually sold in pre-cut 8-foot pieces, and 8 feet is 96 inches. So based on how much molding I needed for my project, I needed 7.5 8-feet pieces, and I decided to just get 8 pieces to again give myself some room for error. Since we aren't using any power tools or a miter box and a saw, we are still going to need something to cut the molding, and that something is going to be miter shears. They're kind of like garden cutters, like very heavy duty scissors that you can use to cut things at specific angles. I got mine off Amazon. They are very sharp and they work great. Since we aren't using any nails, we're gonna need some no nails tape. When I did the molding the first time, I actually used a combination of no nails tape and glue, but honestly, you don't really need the glue. The tape is definitely strong enough to keep it on the wall. It's hard to say how much tape you're gonna need because it really depends on your specific design, but just for some reference, based on my wall over here, I used about 1 roll of tape. You'll also need some wood filler for any pieces that don't end up joining together seamlessly. And then finally, you'll need some caulking to actually seal the gap between the molding and the wall. Paint is gonna be totally up to your personal preference. Personally, I think wall paneling looks best when it's the same color as your wall. I already had some leftover wall paint, so I didn't need to buy any extra. I just needed to get a paintbrush. If the molding you buy is not primed and it's raw wood, then you will want to get some primer to prime it before you paint it. Luckily for me, the paint that I have for the wall is a paint and primer in one. So you have all your supplies and you're ready to get started. If you bought molding by the foot, then you can go ahead and start making your cuts. If you bought molding in pre-cut lengths like I did, then before you dive into cutting, you're gonna wanna actually plan out where you're gonna make your cuts depending on the different lengths that you need. If you wanna be economical and not waste any material, then you're gonna have to create some of your molding lengths by joining together multiple pieces. It might look hacked together at first, but trust me, once you put in the wood filler, you sand it, you caulk it, and you paint it, you really won't be able to tell unless you get right up into it, which you're not going to. Of course, there are definitely pieces that should be kept whole, and those are the ones that are going to be the most visible. So for my design, I wanted to make sure that all of these vertical pieces were kept whole and the horizontal pieces on the top. The least important piece for me was the bottom piece on this middle box. Since the bed is gonna be covering it anyway, you're really never going to see it. So that was the piece that I compromised on, that I created by joining together multiple pieces so that I didn't have to buy another 8-foot length of molding just to keep that piece whole. No, go away. So I cut the pieces by making my first 45-degree cut and then measuring the long side and making a mark where I need to make the next cut. Make sure you're paying attention to the direction of the cuts because every piece needs to have cuts that are going in the opposite direction. When you're using the miter shears, make sure that you're changing the direction when you're making that second cut. Once you have all your pieces cut, you're gonna wanna do a quick sanding of any pieces that look rough. Most of my pieces were nice and smooth. I had one piece that I bought that was a lot more rough than the others, so I took some time to sand all of the ones that were cut from that piece. Now, before you go ahead and attach your pieces onto the wall, you are going to want to template it out first with some painter's tape. Do not skip this step. This is exactly how I realized that I did mess up on my measurements. And if I went ahead and started attaching it to the wall first, I don't even know how I would fix it. If you have some extra molding or just a piece of scrap wood, it's really helpful to cut a piece to the size of your standard gapping so that you can just use that as a guide rather than measuring your gap over and over again. As you're templating out your design and sticking it to the wall with painter's tape, this is where you're going to want to level it out and draw a line either on the inside or the outside of the molding, whatever is more visible to you. This way, when you're actually going to attach it onto the wall, you don't have to level it again and you can just follow that pencil line as a guide. When you're working with really long pieces of wood, like these vertical lengths over here, sometimes they're not 100% straight. They might have a slight bend in it, so it's kind of hard to use that as a guideline when you're trying to level it. I found it easier to position the piece of wood where I wanted, start the straight line, and then put that piece of wood away and just use the level to actually draw the rest of my straight line. The purpose of templating this out is so that you can actually make adjustments to it before actually attaching it to the wall after it's too late. Although the miter shears get the job done, they don't cut as perfectly as a power saw would or even as a miter box and a handsaw would. So this is where, when you join the pieces together at the corner, you might notice some small gaps. You might also notice that you accidentally cut a piece slightly longer than you needed to, and it's now throwing off the position of the piece that it's supposed to join with. For small gaps, don't fret. This is totally gonna be solved with some wood filler. For any longer pieces, Just determine how much longer it is. If it's only a smidge longer, you can always sand it down. If it's like half an inch too long, then you're gonna wanna take your miter shears and just trim it a bit. All right, once you have templated everything out and you are happy with the result and you make sure that your measurements are correct, then it's time to actually stick these on the wall. Like I said, this is a no nails approach and we'll be using no nails tape. So basically I cut it in 2 to 3 inch strips, and then I actually cut that down the middle so that I have 2 pieces of tape. I then apply those pieces of tape on the back of the trim, and I try to space them out pretty evenly with maybe 6 or 7 inches in between. I am not measuring, this is purely eyeballing. And once I have all my tape on there, I just follow the pencil line that I've already made and I stick it on the wall. It sits pretty flush to the wall, but any gap that you see is gonna be covered by the caulking anyway. Once all your pieces are attached to the wall, you can go in with wood filler to fill in any gaps between the joints. There's a couple places where my cuts were slightly off, so I did cut some small pieces to fill in those gaps. While you're waiting for the wood filler to dry, you can now start caulking. Cut the tip at a 45-degree angle and apply it directly onto the gap, smoothing it out with your finger. You're going to do this on both sides of the molding. This not only seals it against the wall, but it also creates a clean, professional, and uniform look as if the molding is in fact part of the wall. I love this part. It is one of the most satisfying things in life, and this is where you really start seeing it come together. Once you're at the stage, the finish line is very close. Once the wood filler and caulk has dried, sand out the wood filler and make sure all the joints are clean, and make sure you didn't miss any rough spots on your molding. I also like to sand the edge of the molding so that it's slightly smooth rather than sharp. And you're finally there. The last step is painting. Depending on whether you need to prime first and what color paint you're using, you'll need to apply 2 to 3 coats, and that should give you good coverage. Since I was painting my molding anyway, I also painted my white closet doors the same color as the wall to give it a more cohesive look. I hope this video was helpful. I hope it gave you some confidence if you've been wanting to do this, but it feels daunting. It is not difficult, it's just time consuming, and you do need to be detailed with your work. I hope you try this, and I hope you get the joy that I do when I look at my wall. Look at it, it is just beautiful. If you enjoyed the video, give it a like, subscribe for more, and if you have any questions, leave them in the comments below and I'll try to answer them. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.